I love plants. In my ideal world, I would be surrounded by plants at all times. As such, I'm frequently inspired to purchase houseplants to try and make that dream a little bit closer to reality. But unfortunately, I am not the only one here who loves houseplants. I don't want to name names, but certain other plant lovers that I know have a very funny way of displaying their affection. I'm always very careful and I only get plants that are non-toxic and safe for cats, but honestly, he is more of a hazard to the plants than the plants are to him. For being so brave. Oh! You heard me talking. I hope he was in frame for any of that. I have tried everything to keep him off of the foliage, but the only thing that ever worked was putting them up in a high place and blocking off any point of access. But if the plants are out of his reach, that means they're also out of reach of the sun, and also out of my line of sight, and therefore out of mind, and so I forget to water them as often as I should. No sunlight and bite marks might work for vampires, but not so much for my African violets. My last surviving houseplant, a pinstripe calathea, finally bit the big one after losing half of its leaves to a certain creature, and the other half to several months of neglect from another certain creature. And I am fed up with spending all of this money on plants and spending all of this time taking care of them and getting attached and giving them names only for them to be savagely devoured by a rampaging beast. Artificial plants are the obvious solution here, but they can get pretty pricey, and they're also all made of plastic, which is something else that my cat likes to chew on. So I have no choice but to make my own fake houseplants out of scrap fabric and spite. He doesn't like to chew on fabric, but he does like to sleep on top of it. So there is that risk. But honestly, that sounds kind of cute, so I'm okay with it. So the first plant that I want to try and recreate is the pinstripe calathea. I don't know if I'm saying calathea right. I should Google that.
Calathea.
Calathea. Apparently it's calathea, not calathea. If I pronounce it wrong later in this video, apologies. I will not remember. But I want to make pinstripe calathea. Calathea. This was the last houseplant that I had that managed to survive the creature and his attempts on her life. I did try to stick it outside towards the end when it had like 2 leaves that were both half dead, and I was like, maybe if I put it outside it'll be better. It did not get better. She is no longer with us, so I'm going to make a clone of her out of fabric, which is deeply upsetting now that I think about it, but she's dead, so it's okay. So a pinstripe calathea. They have sort of these long oval-shaped leaves, and the top side of them are a dark green with these thin little pink lines, and then the undersides are a really dark, vibrant purple. They're so pretty. They're very lovely plants. They're also apparently very delicious. I have some dark green fabric and then a dark purple. I did think about using like a dark green satin or something to get the kind of shiny quality that the leaves have, and I do have a dark green satin, but I want to use it for something else later on, so I'm using this cotton bed sheet that I have on hand. I'm going to do a bunch of pink lines on the green fabric first, and then cut out my leaf shapes, and then start assembling the leaves. Once I had the first leaf fully done, I had the process more or less down. After top stitching the pink stripes onto the green fabric, I cut out 2 half-leaf shapes using a template to get the angle of the stripes right. I sewed the 2 halves together, then carefully unpicked the ends of the pink thread lines so they would stop short of the center seam. On the real plant, the stripes don't quite meet in the middle, plus this also helps hide the fact that my stripes aren't perfectly symmetrical. This was definitely the most time-consuming step and honestly not totally necessary, but I quite like the subtle details. After pressing the green side flat, I cut out a corresponding purple side, and then sewed them together, leaving a gap at the bottom to turn the leaf out. I trimmed the seam allowance down at the point of the leaf and pinked along the curves to help the fabric turn out smoother. After pressing again, I could sew a narrow channel along the center seam for a length of doubled up wire to sleeve in to give the leaf some structure and to create the base for the stem. Then I just needed to close the gap at the base of the leaf by hand using slip stitches. Okay, so I finished up that first batch of leaves. I was able to get 6 out of that piece of fabric that I did the pink stripes on. I got 3 pretty big ones and 3 smaller ones, and I'm quite happy with how they've come out. So now I'm ready to just I'm ready to drop them on the floor. So now I'm ready to move into production mode, basically, and just start making a bunch of leaves until I have enough, however many that's gonna be. I think moving forward I'm going to space the pink stripes a bit further apart. A, I think that'll just look a little bit better. I think it's a little bit tight here. B, I think a little bit more variation will make the whole thing a bit more organic. And C, it will mean I have to sew fewer stripes and unpick fewer lines of top stitching for each leaf. So hopefully that'll make them go a little bit faster. That is the plan. I'm just gonna start sewing stripes. I will say that one chunk of fabric that I did yesterday used up almost an entire bobbin of thread. I only got 1 spool of this pink thread, so we shall see if that's gonna be enough. There may or may not be a craft store trip later today. Only one way to find out. Just barely for 1 line. Almost. Okay, so I've got all of the leaves finished. I was worried I wouldn't have enough of these. So now I need to assemble them all together into the full plant. My plan is basically to just take little bunches and twist the wires together to make clusters of leaves, and then hand sew strips of the green fabric on over the wires to cover them and create the stems. And then of course it's going to need a little container to sit in. I was originally thinking I would sew like a little flower pot out of some fabric, but then I realized I have a flower pot that's just been sitting empty. It did at one point have a plant in it, and we all know how that goes. I have this container, I might as well use it instead of going to the trouble of making another one and have this one sit empty. But I would still like to be able to actually use this as a planter for a real plant at some point in the future, potentially. So I want to figure out a way to make the plant removable. So I'm thinking I might make just like a little drawstring pouch, basically, that cinches around the base of the plant, and I can fill that with fabric scraps. But first I need to put all of the leaves together and actually make this into a plant. I divided the leaves up so I can make 4 clusters of roughly the same size. I joined them by twisting the wires together. There was no real rhyme or reason to how I did this, I just futzed around with them until they were arranged in a way that I liked. I found that with just the wire for structure, the stems were a little too droopy, so I cut down some bamboo skewers and taped them to the wire to add a little bit more support. To connect all the clusters together, I cut off a chunk of a heavy-duty zip tie, folded it in half, and used some masking tape to secure it in a loop. Then I could wrap the wire ends of the leaf clusters to attach them to the loop, which I started to do, but then quickly realized it would be much easier to add the stem fabric with the clusters separate. For the stems, I cut long strips of the green fabric and used a bias tape maker to fold and press the edges to the middle. Then I could wrap a section of stem with the fabric strips and hand sew it into place. Shockingly, hand sewing all of the stem fabric on individually took a full day. I don't know why I thought it wouldn't, but it did. I should have just sewn tubes of the fabric and then sleeved them on to the stems before I attached all the leaves together, but I really wanted them to like meet and diverge like a real plant stem does, as opposed to like just being straight lines that twist together. That would have been fine. You wouldn't have been able to really notice, and it would have been so much faster, but this is what I did. It is done. All the leaves are together. It's looking pretty good. So now I just need to make the dirt bag, I guess, is what it is. It's a bag that's supposed to look like dirt. I need to make the dirt bag. And then I can put this in its pot and arrange the leaves into a fetching presentation. I don't know. I'm trying to film this bit before my camera battery dies. It might have already. I can't tell. Let's finish this plant. We're good. Oh, it's flashing red. The dirt bag construction was very simple. I just cut out a circle of brown quilting cotton, sewed a rectangle around the circumference to make a cup shape, and then folded and stitched down the top edge to make a channel for a drawstring. I unpicked a small opening in the side seam to access the channel, then used a tapestry needle to thread in some brown yarn. Then I could pad out the base of the plant by wrapping it with scrap fabric and then covering that with the drawstring pouch. I purposely made the bag a bit bigger than the pot and understuffed it with scraps so I have the option to switch to a bigger container in the future. Then I just needed to tie the dirt bag shut, tuck the ties into the bag, and with a little zhuzhing, my pinstripe calathea was done. So that is one houseplant down. I'm quite happy with how that came out. I will save more discussion about this process to the end because I am not quite done with this. I don't have much more time to work on this project. I kind of need to finish like today so I can start editing and get this video out on time. But I do want to make at least a small version of another calathea plant. The one that I have in mind has a couple different names. It's a Calathea musica. I've also seen it called like a mosaic plant, mosaic calathea, or a network calathea. It's got a really cool pattern on the leaves. It makes all these little tiny rectangular cells, and I want to try and replicate that in fabric. I think I can do something similar as I did with the pinstripes on this one, where I do a bunch of straight lines of top stitching in a contrasting thread, and then cut that fabric into strips and rearrange and rotate them, and then sew them all back together to create that kind of misaligned brick cell pattern that you see in the leaves. Obviously that's going to be a lot of work, so I'm going to try and do just a small one, just a couple mid-sized leaves, nothing too huge. I can always make more and add on to it to make it a bigger plant if I feel so inclined in the future. One thing about this plant is that the leaves have the same pattern on both sides. It's not like the pinstripe where the top has the pattern and the underside is just a solid purple. The underside of the leaves has the same cell sort of pattern, which means I would have to make twice as many of these pieces. I'm gonna change the look of the plant a little bit and just do the really intricate pattern on the top and then do something a little bit different on the underside, just keep it a solid green. You know, if you're going to the effort of making your own house plants, I think you get to decide if they don't look 100% realistic. I could make this like bright orange if I wanted to. I'm being very restrained. So I have a slightly lighter green fabric that I want to use. It's still not quite as light as it should be for this plant, but it'll work with the dark green thread that I have. So it's time to start sewing a bunch of parallel lines. Again. With all the top stitching done and pressed, I cut the fabric into 1-inch strips and then scrambled the pieces up to break up the continuous lines of stitching. Then I sewed the strips back together, pressing my seams open as I went. I cut out some half-leaf pieces, these were a little bit more heart-shaped than the pinstripes, and then sewed the halves into holes. Next I cut out solid green backs for each leaf, and then sewed them right sides facing and turned them out. After pressing, I sewed the channel along the center seam for the wire and closed the open end by hand. Then I quilted together the 2 layers along the patchwork seams to get at least some of the texture on the backside of the leaves. For the stems, I did the thing that I said I should have done for the first plant and just sewed tubes of fabric to sleeve over the wire stems. I hand sewed the ends of the tubes to the leaves, and then I could just twist them all together to create the final plant, and it looked fine. I made another little dirt bag the same as I did before, and plant number 2 was complete. So that is it. Both of the plants are complete, and I have different feelings about the two of them. I'm very happy with the pinstripe. It's pretty much exactly what I had in mind. It's very full and like lush looking, and I really like the combination of the colors. So very happy here. The other one, the Calathea musica, it's fine. It's okay. It's just not exactly what I had in mind. The fabric that I used is definitely a little too dark on the actual plant. The base color is a much lighter, more yellowy green, and then the veins going through it are a very dark green. And since I used a darker fabric, there just isn't much contrast between the base color and the veins, so it doesn't really get the effect that I wanted. And then also I think I should have cut narrower strips of fabric when I was doing the patchwork just to get the cells even smaller and tighter. That would have had more of the effect that I wanted. It does remind me of the plant from Wally though, so that makes me like it a lot more. Shout out to the mug I put it in, by the way. I found this at the thrift store like a year ago for like $2 or something, and I got it because it was so cute, but it's way too small for me for the amount of coffee that I drink. So it's just been sitting on a bookcase for like a year with nothing to do, and so now it can hold the plant. In terms of being cat-proof substitutes for real plants, I think these are going to do a pretty good job. He's been very interested in them since they're like a new object in the space, so he keeps going over and like sniffing them and checking them out. He has tried to take a few nibbles here and there, but just kind of like chomps at it and then is like, oh, I can't eat this, and then leaves it alone. I can foresee him trying to play with them and like batting at them because they're kind of like springy. He might like smack at them too hard and knock them over, which could break the containers because these are porcelain. I have a museum putty. It's kind of like a blue tack almost, but you use it to secure objects down. Museums use it for displaying items so they don't get bumped and shifted, and it's also very good if you have cats who like to cause problems, which is to say any cat. But that is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. An extra special thank you to all of my patrons who support me over on Patreon, especially those in the Magnanimous Maelstroms tier: Mare Jean Rue, Oscar, Obi Nick Kenobi, Evelyn, Trapped in the Midwest, Bear Hardy, and Perfect Primrose. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day. Sneeze you later. Gross. That's gross.